This is Fitness Blender's abs and upper body strength training workout. In this workout, we're going to go through 6 groups of 2 different exercises each, one of which will be a strength training exercise and the other will be a core exercise. We're going to be doing 10 repetitions for the strength exercise and 20 repetitions for the core exercise, twice through per exercise in an AB-AB format. Now, we've included a cool down with this routine, but not a warm-up, so make sure you get a warm-up in before you get started. Now, if you have a soft surface to do this workout on, then you shouldn't need anything other than a set of dumbbells. Otherwise, you might want an exercise mat as well. So let's go ahead and get ready for our first group, which is going to be a chest press and a toe touch crunch. So again, we'll be doing 2 sets of this, alternating back and forth, starting off with that chest press. So again, drop down on the ground, grab those dumbbells. Those hands are going to come straight up over top of your chest. Those heels come in as close to your butt as is comfortable. Then lift those hips up. We're doing a little bit of a decline chest press. So nice and slow, drop those elbows out to the side and press it right back up over top of your chest. We're only doing 10 repetitions. Make sure you're challenging yourself. You're only doing 2 sets, so by the end of that second set, you should really be struggling with this weight, maybe not even able to finish those repetitions. So try to get a nice big full range of motion. If you have a bench at home, preferably use that bench to give you a little bit more range of motion on those arms. If you don't, then laying on the ground like Kelly's doing is just fine. Just a couple more repetitions to go. Nice slow controlled motion. Keep those elbows straight out from one another. And slowly back up. And let it relax. Go and drop those dumbbells off to the side. We're going to be doing that toe touch crunch next. So those feet straight up in the air, right above those hips, hands above those shoulders. And start in 20 repetitions for this one. Focus on that form, trying to crunch up towards those toes as high as you possibly can, trying to get as much range of motion as possible. But whatever you do, when you drop those shoulders back down to the ground, don't let those abdominal muscles release. Always keep them contracted. Just keep those lungs open, keep that motion going nice and clean. And we're almost done. And let it relax. Drop those feet down, grab those dumbbells again, right back into that chest press. So hands up over top of those shoulders, heels to that butt, bring those hips up nice and high off the ground, trying to get a nice straight line from knee to shoulder. Then slowly drop those elbows off to the sides, slowly press them back up. You want to try to make sure those elbows are pointing off in opposite directions when you kick them out. Don't let them start drooping down towards that rib cage. You want to keep them nice and wide. So when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you're focusing on a controlled, slow motion, and you're making sure that forearm is always perpendicular to the ground so that wrist is directly above that elbow joint. If you're starting to lean those hands out a little bit too far, you might be feeling this a little bit more in those biceps. If you're starting to let those hands lean in a little bit too much, you might be feeling it a little bit too much in that tricep, the back of that arm. So just focus on trying to get that wrist to hover right above that elbow. And we're almost done. Just one more repetition to go. Nice and slow back down. Slowly press it back up. And let it relax. Go and drop those dumbbells off. One more round of those toe touch crunches. So get those feet up in the air. Get those hands over top of those shoulders. And start up. Crunch up towards those toes. Nice tight squeeze at the top of that range of motion. Trying to get those shoulder blades up off the ground as high as you possibly can. When they come back down, again, make sure those abdominal muscles stay contracted. Don't let them release. We're almost done. Just keep those lungs open. Keep that motion going. And let it relax. Good job. Let's go ahead and move on. We're going to take a little bit of a break here if you need one. Otherwise, we're moving right into our next group, which is going to consist of a bent over row and a back bow. So go ahead and stand up if you haven't already. We're going to be starting off with that bent over row. So go ahead and get those weights selected. Go ahead and grab those dumbbells. We're starting with a nice flat back. Slight bend in your knee, bend straight over from those hips, trying to get that chest as parallel to the ground as you can. Then nice and slow, draw those dumbbells up towards that rib cage, tucking those elbows in nice and close to your sides. So make sure that you're keeping those elbows pulled in. You're trying to draw that hand up as close to your rib cage as you possibly can each time, but make sure you're keeping that back completely flat. Do not let that lower back round. Just keep that motion going. Keep those lungs open. If you need to bend those knees a lot because you have tight hamstrings, that's perfectly fine. That bend on that knee really doesn't matter. It's just how flat you can keep that back and how parallel to the ground you can keep it. This is our last repetition right here. And let it relax. Go ahead and drop those dumbbells back down. Go ahead and drop to the ground for that back bow. So flat down in your stomach, those arms and legs extended out straight for the hardest version. If you want it to be a little bit easier, you can tuck those elbows back to that rib cage. So nice and slow, pick those hands and feet up off the ground as high as you can, keeping those arms straight, those legs straight, making sure that you're trying to get as much of a squeeze to those glutes and that lower back as you can. So really trying to focus on lifting those thighs off the ground as well as lifting that chest off the ground. Just keep checking that breathing. Make sure you're keeping those lungs open primarily. You don't really have to worry about a specific style of breathing or pattern of breathing. Just make sure you don't hold your breath. So nice tight squeeze up the top. Slowly drop it back down for the harder version. Don't let those hands or feet touch the ground. Keep a little bit of a hover and keep those arms extended out straight. The more you draw those hands back towards your head and those elbows back towards your rib cage, the easier it's going to get with those arms being back a little bit. Just changes that leverage a little bit. And there's our last one right there. Go ahead and let it relax. Go ahead and stand back up. Grab those dumbbells. We're going to start back into that next round of that bent over row. All right, so focus on keeping that back perfectly flat. Slight bend in that knee. Slowly draw those elbows up back behind you. Keeping those arms nice and close to that rib cage. You want to slowly draw that hand up. Slowly let it back down. Make sure you're really trying to focus on getting as much range of motion as you possibly can while keeping those lungs open and that back perfectly flat. Whatever you do, don't let that lower back round. And just 2 more repetitions. Keep it going. Keep those lungs open. Keep that back flat. We're almost done. And let it relax. Go and drop those dumbbells off. Drop down to the ground again. We got 1 more round of those back bows. So flat down that stomach. Arms and legs extended in opposite directions for the harder version. Nice and slow. Squeeze those arms and legs up off the ground. Get a nice big distance underneath those thighs and that chest. Then slowly drop them back down. Keep those hands and feet hovering for the harder version. You can let them completely touch and relax for just a second if that back starts getting too tired on you. Otherwise, you can always draw those elbows back to your side, so back to that rib cage, hands just outside that shoulder width for the easier version as far as that leverage goes. Just keep that motion going, keep those lungs open, focusing on a tight, tight squeeze at the top of that range of motion. Keep checking that form. I know that lower back's getting really nice and tired. Those glutes are probably getting tired as well. Keep those legs nice and straight. If you want that easier version, tuck those elbows to your rib cage if you're not there already. Make sure you're really focusing on that form. And let it relax. That was your last one, which means that was the last exercise of that group, which means we're moving on to our group number 3. So pause here if you need a little extra rest. Otherwise, we're moving right on to that group number 3, which is going to be an overhead press and a Russian twist. So go ahead and select the amount of weight you want to be using for that overhead press. You can do this either standing or seated. If you're using a lot of weight, you might want to do this seated just for the extra support. Otherwise, go and stand up straight and tall. Those hands come up to those shoulders. Nice and slow, press those hands directly over top of that head. Slowly back down, pausing just about shoulder height. Just go as low as is comfortable on that elbow and on that shoulder, then press it right back up again. Now, if you have shoulder issues, you might need to limit that range of motion a little bit. Otherwise, try to get as full of a range of motion as that shoulder will allow, making sure that you're keeping that back perfectly flat the entire time. That is the main thing you want to focus on, is keeping that back flat, not letting that chest arch backwards, as it's going to kind of tend to want to do, especially if you're lifting a really heavy amount of weight. Just keep that motion going a little bit longer. Keep those lungs open. Nice full extension on those arms at the top, but don't completely lock out those elbows. We're almost done. Just 1 more repetition to go. And let it relax. Good job. Go ahead and drop those dumbbells down. Get ready for our next exercise, which is going to be the Russian twist. Just go ahead and sit down on the ground on that tailbone. Those feet out in front of you just a little bit to help you with counterbalance for your upper body. That back stays perfectly flat, rotating those shoulders left to right. Making sure it's a relatively quick motion, but also very, very controlled. Don't just swing back and forth. Make sure all those muscles to your core are nice and tight. Just rotating back and forth, as much range of motion as you can control. Keep that back flat, keep those lungs open. Make sure those abs, obliques, and lower back are all engaged at the same time. Almost done. And let it relax. Good job. Go and stand back up, grab those dumbbells, start into our second round of that overhead press. Nice flat back, those hands up to those shoulders. And go ahead and start up by pressing those hands directly above your head. Nice and slow back down, pause just about shoulder height again, then go right back up. Again, try to push as much range of motion as that shoulder will allow, as long as you can control it. Make sure that back stays nice and flat. Try not to tilt that chest up towards that ceiling. Keep those lungs open, don't hold your breath, and make sure you keep that motion under control the entire time. Almost done, just 2 more repetitions, keep it going. Nice full range of motion, keep those lungs open, don't hold your breath. And let it relax back down nice and slow. Go ahead and drop those dumbbells. You got 1 more round of that Russian twist. Just going to drop down to the ground, sitting on that tailbone, feet out in front of you for counterbalance, that back nice and flat. Lean back and rotate those shoulders left to right, quickly but under control. Really focus on keeping those lungs open. Don't hold your breath. If you want the harder version like Kelli just did, you can bring those feet up off the ground. Just balancing on that tailbone makes it much more difficult for that core, as well as you're going to feel it in those hip flexors and those quadriceps of those legs. And we're almost done. And let it relax. Good job. Go ahead and hit pause if you want a little extra rest. Otherwise, we'll be starting back into our next group in just a second. All right, our group number 4 is going to consist of a pullover and a bicycle crunch. So go ahead and grab that weight for that pullover. You're going to be down on the ground for this one. So laying flat on your back, grab that dumbbell straight up above your chest with that dumbbell. Then nice and slow, drop it over your head as far as you can control. You should pick a weight that you can get that dumbbell down all the way to the ground, barely touching it, and then bring it right back up. If you can't get a full range of motion on that shoulder, then you're using a little bit too much weight and you need to drop it back down. Make sure that lower back stays flat down. You don't want that chest to arch up towards that wall behind you. You don't want to lift that lower back up off the ground. Otherwise, you're just going to be using leverage to that chest to kind of get a little extra range of motion. So make sure all of that range of motion is just coming from that shoulder joint. Keep those lungs open. Just a few more repetitions to go. Just 2 more repetitions left. Keep that form nice and solid. Keep those arms straight. Keep those lungs open. 1 more. And let it relax. Good job. Go and drop that dumbbell off to the side. We're moving on to our next exercise, which is the bicycle crunch. Just going to lay flat on your back, hands back behind your head. Those feet out, one out extended, the other one over top of your body. Move those feet in a nice big circular pattern, like you're pedaling a bike, just alternating back and forth with that elbow. So right elbow to left knee, left elbow to right knee. Trying to get those shoulder blades up off the ground as high as you can with each crunch. You're going to have a tendency to want to hold your breath. Just keep those lungs open. We're almost done. And let it relax. Good job. Let's go ahead and move back to that pullover so we can grab that dumbbell. Hands come back over top of your chest. Remember, keep that back flat against that mat. Nice and slow, drop that dumbbell over top of your head, down as close to the ground as you can, then slowly back over top of that chest, stopping right above that shoulder joint. Just keep that motion going. Keep those lungs open, those arms straight, and that lower back flat against that mat. Check that form. I know those arms are getting tired. We only have 2 more repetitions to go. Nice full range of motion. Keep those lungs open. Keep that back against that ground. And let it relax. Go and drop that dumbbell back down. We have 1 more round of that bicycle crunch. So hands back behind your head. 1 leg out, 1 leg up. Alternating those legs back and forth in a nice circular pattern. Crunching those elbows up to those knees. Left elbow to right knee, right elbow to left knee, trying to get those shoulder blades up off the ground as high as you can with each crunch. We're almost done. Just keep those lungs open, keep those legs moving. And let it relax. Good job. Go ahead and hit pause if you need a little bit more rest. Otherwise, we'll be starting back in just a second. All right, let's go ahead and get ready for group number 5. We're going to be doing a tricep extension and a side hip raise on the left side only. We'll be doing the right side in our next group. So we're going to be starting off that tricep extension. Kelly's going to be sitting on the ground for this one. You can either do seated or standing or in a chair, whichever is more comfortable. And you can also use either 1 dumbbell or 2. So just go ahead and get it started. Nice slow extension, pushing that dumbbell straight up above your head, keeping those elbows up by those ears, making sure you have a nice full clean range of motion. Don't completely lock that elbow out. When you get up to the top of that range of motion, you want to keep that elbow just a little bit soft, but you do want to make sure you always keep that elbow directly above that shoulder joint. It's going to have a tendency to want to lean forward on you, start drifting forward, but try to keep it back out of your field of vision, so up next to those ears. So that bicep is kind of next to those ears. Just keep that back nice and flat. We're almost done. Just 1 more repetition. And let it relax. Nicely done. Let's go ahead and switch off to our next exercise, which is going to be a side hip raise on your left side. So that left elbow, left hip down. You want to do a harder version first. You're going to get those legs extended out straight. Nice slow raise of those hips, trying to press those hips up as high as you can. If you want to keep going on this version, try to get through the whole thing. Otherwise, you can move to an easier version, which Kelly is doing now, off of those knees. So just keep focusing on trying to get those hips up as high as you possibly can, feeling like you're pulling that shoulder, that left shoulder, down towards that left hip at the same time as shoving those hips up in the air. We're almost done. Just a few more repetitions. And let it relax. Good job. Go ahead and sit back up. Make sure you grab that dumbbell. We're going to go back into that tricep extension. Hands directly above that head. Elbow directly above that shoulder. Bend that elbow. Bring those hands back behind your head as far down as you can possibly go, as far as it's comfortable on that elbow and that shoulder. Then press those hands right back up again. Again, the main thing you want to focus on is keeping a perfectly flat back and keeping that elbow directly above that shoulder joint. Like I said, as you get through this, those arms are going to get tired and those elbows are going to start trying to pull forward. Just try to keep them back as much as you can. We're almost done. Just 2 more repetitions. Keep those lungs open. Keep those elbows back. Slowly back down. And let it relax. Good job. That was the last one of those. Kick that dumbbell off to the side. We have 1 more round of that side hip raise on the left. So again, if you can do a full version, go all the way out on those feet. Otherwise, on those knees, lifting that hip up as high as you possibly can, pulling that left shoulder down towards that left hip as you raise those hips up into the air. Make sure you're keeping those core muscles nice and tight. Making sure you're keeping those lungs open, focusing on getting a nice full range of motion. Almost done. And let it relax. Good job. All right, that was our last exercise of that group, which means you can hit pause and get a little extra rest here. Otherwise, we're going to move right into our last group, group number 6. We're going to be doing a bicep curl and that side hip raise on that right side this time. So go ahead and get ready for that bicep curl. Get those dumbbells ready. Be standing up nice and straight and tall for this one. Keep that back perfectly flat. Nice and slow. Curl those dumbbells up towards that shoulder. Keep that elbow directly underneath that shoulder joint. When you get to the top of that range of motion, you're going to have a tendency to want to pull that elbow forward. Make sure you keep it directly underneath that shoulder the entire time, so keep those elbows back. Nice tight squeeze at the top of that range of motion. When you drop down to that full extension, don't let that arm go completely relaxed. You want to always keep that bicep just a little bit contracted. We're almost done. Just 2 more repetitions to go. Keep that back nice and flat. Keep those core muscles engaged. Keep those lungs open. Nice and slow back down. And let it relax. Go ahead and drop that dumbbell down. We're going to be going on to our side hip raise again, this time on the right side. So go ahead and drop down onto that mat on that right elbow and that right hip. Again, start off with a full version if you can, so those legs completely extended out straight. You can always move that half version a little bit later. Try to get that full range as long as you can. So nice tight squeeze, trying to bring those hips up as high as you possibly can. Remember, again, pulling that shoulder down towards that hip. So that right shoulder down towards that right hip as you lift those hips up high into the air. Try to really focus on that full range of motion. And again, keep those lungs open. And let it relax. Go ahead and stand back up. We got another round of that bicep curl. Go ahead and grab those dumbbells. Standing up straight, nice and tall. You want to make sure that back stays completely flat. Engage those core muscles. Keep that elbow directly underneath that shoulder as you curl that hand up towards that shoulder as tight as you possibly can. Make sure you're getting as much range of motion out of those arms as possible. When you go to that full extension, remember, don't let that bicep completely release. Always keep it just a little bit tensed. Just keep that motion going. Keep those lungs open and keep watching that elbow. It's going to start trying to creep forward on you the more tired those arms get. And we're almost done, just 2 more repetitions. Keep checking that form, nice flat back. Keep those elbows underneath that shoulder. Keep those lungs open. Slowly back down and let it relax. Good job. Go ahead and set those dumbbells back down. We got 1 more round of the side hip raise on the right side. So down on your right side on that right elbow and knee. Out to that full extension if you can do that full extension off those toes. And start up. Bring that hip up really nice and high. Pulling that shoulder down towards that hip. Really shoving those hips up as high as you possibly can. Nice full range of motion. Try to stay at that full extension on those legs as long as you can. If you need to, drop it back to this half version like Kelly's doing. Those knees bent. Should give you a little extra range of motion as well. We're almost done. Focus on that form. Keep those lungs open. And let it relax. Good job. All right, that is it. All we have left to do is our cool down and stretch. We're going to be holding each one of these positions for about 20 seconds each. Now, since those arms are nice and tired, we're going to focus on stretching those out first. So go ahead and stand up if you're not already. We're going to do an arm cross stretch. So grab one arm, pull it across in front of your body, actually kind of pulling that arm to the side, stretching it as close to your chest as you possibly can, trying to get a good stretch through that shoulder as well as that shoulder blade, so across that upper back. Just hold it there a little bit longer. And we're going to go ahead and switch sides. So same exact position on that other arm. Bring that other arm across. Again, pulling that arm across, keeping it as close to your chest as you can. Breathing normally. Trying to stretch out that shoulder and that rhomboid across that shoulder blade. Just a few more seconds. And let it relax. Go ahead and switch to an overhead tricep extension. So one arm comes over top of your head. Reach that hand back towards that shoulder. With the other hand, grab that elbow and pull back and across. You want to try to feel this not only in your triceps, so the back of your upper arm, but also again through that shoulder, kind of the underside and outside of that shoulder. And go ahead and let that one relax. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. So switch arms. That other arm comes up, back behind you, reaching that hand back towards that shoulder. With that other hand, grab that elbow and pull back and across. Just a few more seconds. And let's go ahead and switch it to a wall chest stretch. So one hand back behind you against a wall. Fingers facing back behind you. Rotate those shoulders away from that hand. You should feel a stretch through your chest. If you're feeling it more in your bicep, then just rotate that hand so the inside of that elbow is facing up towards the ceiling. And then you should feel it more focused on that chest. There's a couple more seconds till we switch. And go ahead and switch sides. That other hand comes up against that wall. Those fingers facing back behind you. Rotate that chest away. Remember, trying to focus mainly on getting a good stretch to that chest, through the outside or that front side of that shoulder. Keep those lungs open. Just a couple seconds left of this one. We're moving to a downward facing dog next. Those hands and feet just about shoulder or hip width apart. You can press those heels down towards the ground on those feet. Make sure you're pressing your chest down towards those feet as well, trying to keep a nice straight line from wrist to hip and from hip to ankle. So keep those legs straight, keep those arms straight, pressing that chest back down towards those feet. And just a few more seconds till we move to a cobra, so go ahead and drop it down onto that stomach. Hands to the base of that rib cage, press that chest up towards the ceiling. Try to arch that chest up as high as you can, looking up towards the ceiling. You can go to a full extension on those arms if you can. Otherwise, keep a little bit of a bend in that elbow if you're not quite this flexible. Just keep pushing through it. Keep those lungs open. Stretching through those hip flexors into that stomach. And let it relax. We're going to move to a supine torso stretch, so flat on your back. You're going to lay one leg out straight. The other leg is going to cross over top, rolling those hips off to the side. Try to keep those shoulders flat against the ground as best you can, focusing on getting a really good stretch to that torso. So you should feel it through those obliques, those abdominal muscles, and a little bit into that lower back. Just a few more seconds, then we're going to switch sides. And go ahead and switch so that other leg goes out straight. The opposite leg crosses over top. Again, shoulders flat against the ground, trying to rotate those hips off as much as you can while still keeping those shoulders against the ground. Just breathe normally and let all those muscles release and relax. And just a couple more seconds till we switch off to a deep glute stretch. And go ahead and switch. So laying flat on your back. You're going to pull one leg in, the other leg's going to cross over top. You're going to feel this stretch in the leg you have crossed over top. So you're going to feel it in that glute muscle and that butt muscle, as well as kind of down inside that hip joint as well. Just hold it there, constantly pulling that leg in a little bit closer if you can, just breathing normally. And go ahead and switch sides. That other leg comes over top, grabbing behind that other thigh this time, pulling that leg in. Should be feeling it in that opposite hip this time. Again, keep those lungs open, constantly trying to pull that leg in just a little bit closer. And just a few more seconds till we switch to our last stretch, a full body stretch. So go ahead and switch those arms and legs flat out against the ground in opposite directions. Take a nice deep breath in, arch that back up off the ground, pressing those hands and feet in opposite directions. Really press them out. Exhale, let it release, and then again, one more time, inhale, arching that back up, pressing those feet and hands out in opposite directions. And let it relax. All right, good job. That was our last stretch, which means this workout is complete. Hope you enjoyed it.